Well, hello, everyone, and welcome to Caregiving for Yourself and Others with Less Stress and More Well-Being. I'm Mary Collette Rogers, Healthy Kitchen Companion, and I'm here with Barbra Cohn, author of Calmer Waters, The Caregiver's Journey Through Alzheimer's and Dementia. No doubt you've heard about the sandwich generation. It's a term that's become popular recently to refer to those of us who are sandwiched between caring for children on the one side and parents on the other. And of course, caring for those close to us is an honor and one of life's most profound experiences. But that doesn't mean it can't
leave you feeling very
sandwiched in and stressed out. So today, Barbra and I want to talk to you about ways we can give care to the others while preserving our own well-being. A key concept we'll be talking about is keeping stress under control. And the main stress-relieving mechanism we'll be sharing is how to use the power of good nutrition. We want to share some simple advice around good nutrition along with practical tips and tools so you can really start putting that information to work and seeing the benefits, whether that's better care for you or someone else in your life. Well, Barbra, let's start out with you. From our conversations about your book, Calmer Waters, I was struck by how big a role stress plays in the challenges faced by caregivers. Can you tell us more about that? Why is that?
Sure. First, I'd like to start off by giving you a little bit of my background. I spent a decade caring for my husband, Morris, who passed away in 2010 from younger onset Alzheimer's disease at age 69. Afterwards, I was compelled to write Calmer Waters, The Caregiver's Journey Through Alzheimer's and Dementia, in order to help other caregivers reduce their stress, sleep better, stay healthy, deal with feelings of guilt and grief, and to ultimately find inner peace, because I've been there, and I felt that if I didn't try to help others learn how to care for themselves and their care partner, my experience would have been for naught. So I'd like to start with an explanation of why stress is so devastating to caregivers. Statistics show that the stress of caregiving can actually result in chronic disease for the caregiver and take as many as 10 years off one's life. It was first described in the 1920s by Walter Cannon as the fight or flight response, which I'm sure you've heard of. And the typical example is the hunter who's in chase after a wild animal. Your pupils dilate to sharpen vision, heart rate and blood pressure increase, to accelerate the delivery of oxygen, to fuel muscles and critical organs. Today, the response is more commonly triggered by psychological threats than physical ones, such as when we're stuck in a traffic jam and we just start feeling like we're going to lose our temper, or our blood starts to boil over. The ultimate in that is road rage. Or when we get our heart broken, we might really feel that fight or flight response and just want to run away. So when the body's in a constant state of emergency alert due to the chronic stress of something like caregiving, the adrenal glands, those small walnut-shaped glands that sit on top of your kidneys, get stuck in the on position. When this happens, the whole system goes into chronic fight or flight. Glucose that is dumped into your bloodstream goes unused, so your body has to produce an enormous amount of insulin to handle it. And eventually this can result in hypoglycemia or even diabetes. Fat that gets dumped into your blood also goes unused, and it clogs up your arteries, leading to cardiovascular disease. And if you're feeling stressed and you're a coffee drinker, you drink 3 or more cups of coffee every day, the stress hormone cortisol becomes elevated. And this can set you up for countless health problems, including poor sleep, impaired immunity, and age-related deterioration. So the adrenal glands produce or contribute to the production of about 150 hormones. When they're repeatedly activated, the adrenals can become exhausted. And once the adrenal buffer's gone, you become a prime candidate for things like asthma, allergies, fibromyalgia, chronic fatigue syndrome, autoimmune diseases, and more. Cortisol is often called the stress hormone, and it's been linked to higher amounts of plaque in the carotid arteries and to impairment of learning and memory. Too much cortisol can disrupt our immune system, making it more likely that we get sick or fatigued.
Oh, Barbara, I get it. I had no idea such a cascade of problems is triggered by being overstressed. And I wonder if some caregivers don't really realize how much stress they're under. Because I'm thinking back to my caregiving days, I never realized that I was under such stress until much later. I just kept racing along trying to gut it out rather than stopping to think about how I might have helped myself.
Well, Mary, I didn't even realize it until the very end, after my husband died, that I hadn't even been breathing. After he died, it was really soon afterwards, I realized this, and I took a deep breath, and I could feel my whole body relax.
Right. I'm kind of breathing with you right now.
Yeah.
Wow. Well, I sure hope this webinar can be of help and offer hope to anyone in a caregiving role and maybe some awareness of this stress. And as I mentioned, today we'll be talking about nutritional tools, specifically foods that can help manage stress. But Barbara, I'm guessing you discovered a lot of routes to deal with stress that you share in your books. Do you mind sharing a few of those just before we head into the nutritional aspects?
Oh, sure. So first of all, I have a certificate from the Bowman College of Nutrition and Culinary Arts, and I learned lots of ways to counteract stress and the production of cortisol with healthy foods. There's a chapter in my book by Dr. Ed Bowman, the founder and president of Bowman College, and he talks about stress-reducing foods, herbs, teas, as well as recipes that support energy and immunity for both the caregiver and care partner, which is the term that's used for the person who's being cared for. But before we get into food, I'd like to give a brief overview of my book. Even though the target audience is Alzheimer's and dementia, the book can be used by anyone who's even healthy, and especially caregivers for any situation that they're dealing with. Calmer Waters includes my personal journey, essays by spiritual leaders, including why it's so important to speak sweetly to everyone we encounter. There's a ritual for saying goodbye to someone who's still alive, yet greatly diminished by Alzheimer's. There are essays by other caregivers. I invited other caregivers because, as the saying goes, once you've seen one person with Alzheimer's, you've only seen one. And the same goes for caregivers. Everyone has their own way of dealing with a world that's been turned upside down. There's a conclusion about after your caregiving ends, how do you reinvent yourself in your life? The section on healing modalities is the longest, and it contains 20 chapters, many of which are contributed by experts in their field. And these are all about reducing stress and anxiety and just feeling better and revving up your immune system. And some of my favorites and the most popular ones in the book are a chapter on aromatherapy, which is contributed by Lorraine Pounds, a renowned aromatherapist. And she gets into the specific types of oils that can be used to uplift the mood, reduce anxiety and stress, increase appetite in those who are having a hard time eating, helping with sleep. I used aromatherapy oils with my husband and found it extremely helpful. You can buy a little plug-in. There's a piece of felt in there, and you just drop some aromatherapy oil on it, and the molecules get diffused from the heat into the room, and it really helped him especially with anxiety. It would just calm them down immediately. And another favorite chapter is on dance, written by Melissa Michaels, a dance therapist. And this chapter cites a 21-year-long study that was published in the New England Journal of Medicine that found when dance was compared with 11 other types of physical activity, including swimming and bicycling, it came out as the number one way to support cognition and reduce risk of dementia. So I always advise people just put on some groovy music and dance in your living room as though no one's watching. If you like to dance, it's just such a great way of relieving stress. And there's lots of other modalities in there, including meditation, breath work, music, eating well, horticulture therapy, art therapy. It goes on, but I used a lot of them for my husband and myself, and it definitely helped.
Wow, Barbara, what I'm seeing is this is really a comprehensive book for anybody who's in a caregiving role. And it's really hopeful to see that there are so many options that are available to help us with stress once we become aware of it. And it looks like you really understood and made a point to take care of yourself, too, through all of this.
Well, I did. I really did. And one thing I want to point out about these modalities is the beauty is that they can be used by the caregiver alone or with the person they're caring for, such as art therapy. There's a chapter on that in the book, and there are real simple art exercises or just little projects that both people can do together.
Oh, that's beautiful. And what a way to spend time together, because I imagine conversation might be sort of limited at this point, and being able to do these other activities is maybe a good way to relate with the other person.
Exactly. Even just sitting next to the person and matching your breath to them is a great stress reliever for both people.
Oh, that's so interesting. Well, let's talk now about some of the nutritional discoveries you found as well that are helpful in managing the stress of caregiving. You used a phrase that I liked. It was called calming yourself with calming foods. Can you tell us about that?
Sure. Well, vitamin B is called the stress-reducing vitamin, and magnesium is referred to the stress-reducing mineral. And there are a number of foods that contain these vitamins and minerals that can be very helpful. Vitamin B is depleted by stress, so it's really important to include dark leafy greens in your diet, such as kale, spinach, collard greens, which have vitamin B. Asparagus is a good source of folic acid, which is one of the B vitamins. And magnesium, the mood mineral, is found in pumpkin seeds, quinoa, greens, black beans. Whole grains and protein-rich foods are great for helping to reduce stress. And I'd like to emphasize the importance of eating a good breakfast, because at night our blood sugar levels drop, and we wake up in the morning and might not be feeling our best. And oftentimes people will start chugging away at the coffee filled with caffeine that's just going to make us feel better temporarily, and then eventually our blood sugar is going to drop again. So it's so important to rev up our energy and support the immune system with a good breakfast. And, we might want to get into more on that a little bit later.
Well, right, and I know there's a lot of research, not just for stress reduction, but for a lot of reasons. Researchers and nutrition professionals are talking about the importance of breakfast for a lot of reasons, which brings me to the point that for those who are listening, one of the things we hope that our conversation will do today is that it'll be helpful, even if you don't have any big caregiving obligations to others. It will, inspire you and give you some tips and pointers and information that can help you care for yourself as well.
Exactly. And I do want to mention that it's been said that at some point in your life, you'll either be a caregiver or be cared for. Statistics now show that 1 out of 3 seniors will die with some form of dementia. So we really want to start supporting ourselves right now before we enter into those senior years, because it's never too late to start taking care of yourself. And
hopeful
just
news.
to give you an idea of how many caregivers there are, last year 16 million friends and family provided 18 billion hours of unpaid care for 5.5 million Americans with Alzheimer's disease. And that's just one disease. So you can imagine how many millions and millions of caregivers are out there. But again, the most important thing is to take care of yourself, whether or not you're in a position of caring for others. So, Mary, I'm interested in how your services and programs work around the stress issue.
I'd love to talk about that, but first I just wanted to say that it's always so exciting to learn of new ways in which food can support us in every aspect of life. It shouldn't be a surprise that food has such stress-relieving benefits. It helps with almost every other aspect of our health, so why wouldn't it help us deal better with stress, right? So getting more specifically to your question about my programs and services, where I come into the healthy eating equation is helping people translate good eating advice into real meals on the table. You could say I'm a healthy eating implementer. In other words, you've given us some invaluable nutrition strategies for managing stress, like eating more greens, more whole grains, getting a good breakfast. But this good eating advice does absolutely no good if it doesn't show up on your table. Just knowing all sorts of facts about vitamins, minerals, fats, and other things, it's worthless if it's only in your head. Now, I know that's a really obvious observation, but all too often, nutritional advice still gets parked at the front door, and it never makes it to the kitchen, much less the table. So implementation skills are really important to translate nutrition facts into food on the table, into those meals you eat 3 times a day, day in and day out, that deliver all sorts of health benefits, including calming our stress. But you should know that implementation skills are important for another reason, too. It's because they deal with another source of stress, which you may not think of right off the bat, but it's a stress that comes from knowing you should be doing something, but not having the ability and power to make it happen. And that disconnect can create a very unsettling and stressful dissonance. So in this case, like Barbara, you're sharing some really good nutritional information to relieve stress. And yet, if you can't make it happen, it might have the unintended consequence of actually causing frustration, disappointment in yourself, and more stress. So take, for instance, when we hear about all the benefits of eating greens with their B vitamins, it's very exciting and hopeful. But if we can't make that happen in our lives, then not only do we not get those health benefits of eating greens, but we can very well get disappointed in ourselves, beat ourselves up, which adds to our stress. So my programs and services are all about sharing the skills, the knowledge, the structure, and the time management habits, so we really are empowered and excited to make the meals we really want to be eating, with those whole grains, the greens, with adequate proteins, all the things that you're mentioning today. And my mission lies in helping you feel confident and be successful making the meals you need to beat stress without adding more unintended stress to your life.
Well, Mary, that makes perfect sense, but can you tell us more about how you help people become healthy eating implementors?
Let me start actually by backing up a little bit like you did, too, because we didn't do introductions right at the beginning. Like you, I've had several caregiving episodes in my life, and my implementation skills were developed during one of my main caregiving periods when my kids were very young, and that was 27 years ago now. Later on, I experienced the sandwich generation effect when my kids were in high school, and they were transitioning to college. I was transitioning through menopause, and I was caring for my parents as they transitioned through their final years. And while I definitely honed my implementation skills during the second caregiving experience, it all really started when my kids were just 6 months and 2 years old. And at that time, we were all kind of a sick mess. My son kept getting one ear infection after another, even while he was on antibiotics. My daughter was being diagnosed as an asthmatic, and I was cycling through one virus after another. And I was kind of at wit's end, not knowing what to do, and something inside me told me to go see this naturopath that I heard about. And, 27 years ago, that was a very unusual thing to do, is go see a naturopath. And even more unusual, he advised that we eliminate all gluten and dairy from our diets, which we did, which, most people thought I was crazy at the time and, didn't get the connection between how food and health was really there. But we experienced a small miracle. Within a couple months, we were all healthy, happy people again, and it really revealed to me this amazing power of good eating, which I've been excited to share with others, and that's another reason why I'm so excited to do this webinar with you today, Barbara, is that to share yet again another reason why let's do pay attention to the way that we're eating. It's so powerful. So as I mentioned, within a couple of months, we were all happy and healthy people. But that's the point at which I started looking down the road, and I said, I had been able to keep us on this healthy diet for a couple of months, but it had been very difficult. But this wasn't like a 6-week diet that you could cancel and just go back to eating pizza. I needed to be able to do this for life, both for my own health and the health of my children. And yet I was looking at how hard it had been for those first 2 months, and I wondered, can I sustain this? And I think that's where a lot of people come to be, especially like when you're talking about a long caregiving experience like you experienced. We need to take care of ourselves for many, many years. And that's when I discovered the importance of implementation skills that could make healthy meal making a manageable thing that I could do day in and day out for life. And it took a while, but I gradually pieced together the systems and strategies that made healthy meal making entirely manageable. And I've combined the best of these tools and other resources into an integrated approach to meal making that I call the New Kitchen Way. And it addresses 3 main areas of meal making with new ways of doing things. First, I offer classes that show how to be new in the kitchen so you don't get bogged down by all the usual barriers like your kitchen is a time trap, you can't figure out what to make, you don't have the right ingredients, you don't have the right equipment, on and on. And then secondly, my programs teach how to be new in your cooking. I help you recover from the many years of convenience eating that has robbed us of the capability, the confidence, and motivation to make our own meals from real whole foods. And finally, and this is something that might sound unusual, but I also help us be new in our thinking. You may not be aware of this, but we've been conditioned to believe that food, cooking, and the kitchen, they aren't worthwhile. And they aren't critical parts of our lives, which makes it very hard for us to find the time and energy to devote to these, what are really vital aspects of our well-being. So a big part of my work lies in introducing a new, more helpful way of thinking about food and cooking that I call the New Kitchen Culture. So at all 3 of these levels, the kitchen, cooking, and thinking, I've developed one-on-one coaching services, group coaching, and online and live classes. And if I had to summarize what my services are all about in my classes, it would be turning people on to the incredible power of organization. Organization has this incredible power to positively impact our ability to make the meals we really want to be eating. And now I know that the O word can make a lot of people feel nervous and even turn them off. Like, organization is so rigid and sterile. It doesn't belong in the kitchen, does it? We want cooking to be this spontaneously creative act, not something that's hemmed in by tedious organizational systems. So I want to talk more about this organizational piece, Barbara, but because it's really a crucial missing link in most kitchens today. But first, I'd like to also learn a little more from you about the nutrition advice you offer that can ease caregiving. I think you have some important information on food and mood, and what you call our natural mood boosters.
Well, sure. Well, first of all, I'd like to talk about neurotransmitters and how they directly affect our mood. So neurotransmitters are the brain chemicals that communicate information throughout your brain and body. the brain uses these neurotransmitters to tell your heart to beat, your lungs to breathe, and your stomach to digest. They can also affect mood, sleep, concentration, even your weight. And they can cause adverse symptoms when they're out of balance. And they can be depleted many ways. It's estimated that 86% of Americans have suboptimal neurotransmitter levels. So again, stress or poor diet or protein deficiency, poor digestion, poor blood sugar control, drugs, both prescription and recreational, alcohol, caffeine, all these things can deplete them. So how do we want to build them up? Well, let's talk about some natural mood boosters. First of all, comfort foods like sweet potatoes, brown rice, oatmeal, comforting carbs, but we want to make sure they're healthy carbs. We definitely want to stay away from the refined carbs like potato chips or pretzels or cookies, cake, all that kind of unhealthy carbs, which are empty calories. So these happy foods, which they're also called, whole grains, allow your brain to process more serotonin. And that's the neurotransmitter that makes us feel uplifted or happy. When we're depleted, then we can become depressed. Tryptophan is a neurotransmitter that it's found in, actually it's an amino acid, It's found in avocado, chocolate. A lot of people will be happy to hear that, but that's dark chocolate or raw chocolate. Turkey, which everybody knows when they eat turkey at Thanksgiving, they're feeling pretty relaxed afterwards, and that's because of the tryptophan. So tryptophan is a precursor to serotonin. Another thing we want to make sure is that we're getting enough healthy omega-3 fatty acids, which also improve mood. And it's good to remember that our brain is 60% fat, and we need to get it from food. So we want to focus on eating good fats that are found in things like deep cold water fish, such as salmon, mackerel, sardines. If you don't eat fish, you can find it in walnut, flaxseed or flax meal, olive oil, also avocado. I unfortunately don't like to eat avocado, but I do use avocado oil.
Oh, that was a good option then, if you can't eat avocado, then to do the oil.
Yeah, especially for somebody like me. So vitamin D, when we spend time outside in the summertime, especially if you're a gardener, you probably are getting enough vitamin D, but vitamin D is one of those vitamins that most people who live in North America are deficient in, especially in the winter. We're not spending a lot of time outside. And if you're at a latitude, say from Colorado up north, you are definitely not getting enough vitamin D. And this was found by Dr. Horlock, who did an experiment or did tests on people who were living in Boston and found that people at a northern latitude were all deficient. So I always recommend that people take a supplement of vitamin D3, and it helps with high levels of stress. So another thing, I did mention magnesium a little bit earlier. It's the most important mineral for the heart, and it supports healthy blood pressure and decreases food cravings. It balances our blood sugar, and it nourishes and calms the nervous system. It actually protects the body from the damage of stress. So another way to get it besides food is to soak in Epsom salt baths, which I love to do, and it's an instant stress reliever.
Yeah, that's interesting because I love the Epsom salt baths, and they are always very relaxing, but I didn't know that was the reason. So cool.
Right. So yeah, I also wanted to mention that research shows that people with major depression have less magnesium in their bloodstream. And taurine, I wanted to mention that. It's a sulfur-containing amino acid, and it functions with glycine and GABA, which is an inhibitory neurotransmitter. So taurine is one of the most abundant amino acids in the body, and it's found in many areas of our body, including the central nervous system and the skeletal muscle, and even in our heart and brain. And taurine, mostly you get it through meat, which is a reason that you might want to think about taking a multivitamin supplement if you don't eat much meat. So those are some of the most common neurotransmitters, and I always recommend that people try to follow the Mediterranean diet, which is just an overall holistic diet of getting healthy fats and healthy carbs through all the vegetables and grains and beans and low-fat fish. And it pretty much supplies us with what we need to stay healthy. And talk about eating, making positive food choices. We want to really focus on diversity, eating a lot of foods with different colors, trying to incorporate different types of peppers, the greens, the red. During fall, it's easy to get the orange carotenoid in our diet because those produce lots of vitamin A, which are so important for supporting the immune system as the weather gets colder. And we want to eat warmer foods in the winter and also try to eat a heavier diet with more protein and fats to support the immune system.
You know, Barbara, I'm really with you on that Mediterranean diet. We teach a lot of classes around the Mediterranean diet, and why we love it so much is that it's such an easy way to do exactly the things that you're talking about, and it's so common sense. So unless you have some other particular dietary approach that you have studied and you really believe in and so forth, if you don't have one, the Mediterranean diet is just such a good, easy, common sense way to get a really pretty darn good diet. And, you know, it might be that you have to tweak things here or there or something. But, you know, 95% of the time it's going to be everything that you need. And so I'm glad you brought that up. I think that's a really good suggestion.
Well, it's my favorite diet. I just find it to be an overall really healthy, balancing diet, including everything that we need. So, Mary, now we know there are a lot of powerful foods that can really help us relieve the stress of caregiving and improve mood. I wonder if you could share how the power of organization can help us to do a better job weaving those foods into our lives so we can reap their benefits and not add to our stress load any further.
Well, yeah, let's do that. And I do get pretty excited about the potential here. But like I said, sometimes we can have a hard time inviting organization into the kitchen and to the table. So a lot of what I do is just help people get comfortable with that idea as a first step towards implementing a healthier diet. And a good place to start is by looking at the business world, where we don't seem to have nearly the resistance to organization, and in fact we often embrace it, and gratefully, and for good reason, because it makes our work life so much easier and successful. And this fact was on full display I just was listening to a webinar the other day, like a week ago. I was listening to the webinar with a woman named Sage Levine, who runs an online startup called Women Rocking Business. And Sage was interviewing Melinda Cohan, another online entrepreneur who helps businesses harness the power of organization. Well, Sage began the conversation by admitting that she was this free-spirited entrepreneur who treasured her autonomy and owning her own time. So all of Melinda's organizational advice had fallen on her deaf ears for a long while. She said, and I quote here, "I have spent a lot of months of my business resisting putting key things into place that would make my life easier." And doesn't that happen in the kitchen, too? There's a lot of things that would make our life easier, but we resist putting them into place. Well, Sage finally saw the light and began really embracing structures and systems and automation in her business. And not surprisingly, she reaped the rewards, which is why she wanted her audience to learn about the process of automating and putting structures up underneath what they're doing. And that's really what I'm talking about with the New Kitchen Way, is putting up structures underneath to support what you're doing in the kitchen. You could also call it putting up infrastructure in your kitchen. And what happens once you start putting systems and structures into place and they work? Well, here's what Sage says, and again, I quote, "You start falling in love with them," she said. You fall in love with the results they give you. She's a very enthusiastic person. But then here comes the really interesting part. And this is when my ears really perked up, because I knew that Barbara and I were going to be having this conversation. Because after Sage talked about how wonderful, how you fall in love with systems and structure, Melinda, her guest, went on to say that the results of structures and systems aren't limited to just helping you be a successful entrepreneur. And I quote again here, "The structure helps promote self-care." Let me repeat that because it's so important. "The structure helps promote self-care," said Melinda. And then she described how she had just gone through a really intense period of her work, but she was still able to take a little time off for a self-care vacation. And the reason she could take time for a self-care vacation was because of the structures and systems that she had in place. As she said, those structures and systems are what created the container for self-care to be possible. What Melissa found is that in business, as crisis management gives way to a calmer system structure approach, you get an endorphin rush, your creativity explores, you have all these new ideas, and you can really start executing. So I'm hearing all this, and I'm saying to myself, exactly. And guess what? The same thing happens in the kitchen. When we put organization to work, we can have all these amazing benefits. Now, is that hard to believe? On the surface, I know it seems like organization would shut us down in the kitchen, make things too rigid, take out all the spontaneity and fun. But in fact, it is chaos that takes the fun and success out of meal making. You know, I always challenge people to think about exactly how much fun, creativity, spontaneity, and healthy meals are you experiencing when your cooking life is in chaos? And maybe our listeners want to think about that too. And I'll bet that if your cooking life is in chaos, you actually end up eating the same old things over and over. Your meals come out just so-so. You aren't able to, for instance, weave into your diet and eat the stress-relieving foods that you know would really help you. And you certainly aren't able to spontaneously throw together a creative, fun, and interesting meal. Now, add the intensity of caregiving to an already chaotic meal-making process, and you can see why you might just have trouble churning out health-supporting meals each day. So that's why step one, and the most important step for implementing Barbara's Wise nutritional advice, is to make friends with organization. Be willing to give it a try. In the business seminar with Sage, she asked her audience members to chime in on the chat box about whether they love or hate systems. Well, can I challenge you to ask and answer that same question? Can you believe in the power of organization in the kitchen? Can you trust that it would be at least worth a try? If you want, answer in the comment boxes that are below this webinar recording. I'd love to see what you say.
Well, Mary, you've got me convinced on this organization thing. And one of the things that I always did, especially when I was caregiving, was to cook a big pot of beans, and I would have them last for several days. I could add them to my salad. I could use them to make bean burgers with quinoa and vegetables. I could use them in burritos. One thing I love to do in the summer is to make a big fillet of salmon that'll last me several days, and I put that on a big bed of greens. Arugula is my favorite. And I just throw in all kinds of vegetables, beet, carrot, garbanzo beans, or pumpkin seeds. I sprinkle a little feta cheese on top, and I never get sick of it. I just love that meal. And now that it's getting colder, I'll probably be making a lot more soup. And then one of my favorite dishes to make is baked lentils. So I'll chop up an onion with carrots and winter squash, throw it in a casserole, and then about a cup of lentil beans, cover that with about an inch of water, and throw in some salt and pepper and rosemary, and bake it for about an hour. And then I turn off the oven and I sprinkle some grated cheese on top. And if you add a grain with that meal, you've got a complete protein. And that's something that also will last for several days in the refrigerator. It's just anything to make your life easier and simpler.
Those are excellent examples of getting organized around your kitchen, like you think you've thought ahead, a few days in advance, and you make something that will last. So that the big thing is you don't want to be going into that kitchen at 5:30 with no idea what to do and you're hungry. That's when you'll resort to things like, cheese and crackers or just grabbing a handful of this or a handful of that. Then you're not getting all these great nutrients that you're talking about, and you compromise your system. So those are excellent ideas, and I hope our listeners will, take those seriously. Those are excellent ways to get organized and think ahead about your eating.
So, Mary, can you give us some more examples of what organization looks like in the kitchen around meal making?
Oh, yes, sure. And to begin with, the big thing to know is that we're not talking rocket science here. The systems and structures that will help you make healthy cooking natural and easeful are things you already know about. Like I said, the harder part is being willing to utilize them and making them a regular habit so they become your new MO, just the way you do things. So based on my journey out of chaos, I discovered the kitchen and meal making can be divided into 6 main areas, which makes it easier to get a handle on it. And those areas are, 1, what are you going to make for a health-supporting meal? 2, where are the recipes you need? Do you have all the ingredients you need from the store? 4, do you have what you need in the pantry? Do you have the equipment you need? And 6, do you have a decent space and place to cook? So we just need to get things under control in these 6 areas, and then the magic starts to happen. It becomes just no big deal to pull together good meals, kind of like you did with the examples that you gave with the lentil bake and the salmon. And the way we get these 6 areas under control is by putting into practice what I call the 6 kitchen smart strategies. First, obviously, you always want to know what you're going to make before heading to the kitchen to start making a meal. So the key here is getting in the think ahead and plan habit instead of what I call the last-minute Lucy approach. And then in terms of recipes, when it's 5:30 and you're starving, that's no time to be trying to find a new recipe or track down one that's buried in your recipe heap or some cookbook or somewhere on your computer. The time to find new, healthier recipes that incorporate your good advice, Barbara, is well in advance. And then you keep those recipes organized so you can find them when you need them. As for ingredients, who hasn't experienced the annoyance of finally deciding to make a dish and realizing you're missing one or more ingredients? Or equally bad, you're in the middle of making a dish and discover that you're missing something. And who doesn't dread tromping around the grocery store, aisle after aisle, trying to figure out what to buy that won't be bad for you and that will maybe be a little fun and interesting? Well, a simple, old-fashioned, dorky shopping list is all it takes to remedy those problems. And the 4th kitchen smart area is the pantry. And that's another term that's shrouded in dorkiness, and yet can I tell you how liberating a pantry can actually be? It can keep you from having to make so many trips to the dreaded grocery store, saving you valuable time and money. But you have to know how to create a pantry, what to put in it, and how to keep it stocked, and those are secrets of what I share in this area. 5th kitchen smart area is having the right equipment. And that usually isn't too big a problem for most people. Actually, the more common problem I see in this area is people having too many gadgets and tools, not be able to find places for them all, and then be able to extract them when needed. And the other big problem is having the equipment and rarely using it because you don't know how to use it or what to use it for. And then the final kitchen smart area is the space itself, the kitchen itself. How often do you find yourself like balancing a cutting board on the sink because the counters are cluttered with stuff? Or how often is it dangerous to pull some ingredient or pan from a cupboard because everything else will come falling out? So this is why it's really important to create a hassle-free workspace that includes clear counter spaces as well as cupboards where tools and ingredients are easy to find and extract. Now, these kitchen smart strategies sound so simple, and yet they contain kernels of magic. Can you trust me that as you put them in place in your kitchen, bit by bit, get ready to be surprised, because suddenly you're going to find yourself more and more capable of making the kinds of meals you want to really be eating. And this magic is what we call inevitability planning. In other words, you've planned so success is inevitable. And because you have the structure and preparations in place, then you get a surge of motivation to execute, to go ahead, make that meal, and feel good about what you're making and eating.
So, Mary, let's say you want to start eating a good breakfast. And maybe now you're someone who just gets a coffee drink and a little croissant, or maybe you just eat a piece of fruit and then plow into your day. How can your Kitchen Smart strategies help someone make a good breakfast show up on their breakfast table each day?
Oh, that's a perfect example. And based on what you've been sharing today, I think we have a pretty good idea of what a good breakfast is. And correct me if I'm wrong, but that's one that features whole grains rather than the white refined flour used in croissant. And I'm a big vegetables for breakfast person, so I would want to get in some of greens, as you recommended, in the morning, first thing. And, in fact, that's exactly what I did this morning. And then you mentioned some kind of protein, making sure that gets into your breakfast. So think about eggs or bacon or beans or tofu. So step one is the recipe piece. And that's figuring out a few breakfast ideas. Maybe you find some actual recipes, or maybe you just come up with a couple kind of off-the-cuff ideas that would incorporate these nutrition pieces, like whole grains, greens, some kind of protein. For me, that looks like my usual breakfast scramble that's made with brown rice, greens, and eggs cooked in a good fat. And Barb, isn't it true that that looks a lot like your breakfast too?
Yeah, it looks a lot like my breakfast. I want to first of all say why it's so important to eat a good breakfast again, and then I'll tell you what my favorite breakfast is. So we're fasting during the night, and in order to stabilize your blood sugar so your mood stays even and you can perform at your best, it's advised that you eat breakfast within an hour of waking up. And a lot of people complain, oh, I feel nauseous in the morning, I don't feel like eating. Well, you know why? It's because your blood sugar is low. When your blood sugar is too high or low, it's a signal to the body to store calories. And this is exactly what can add fat around your middle, which is a problem with a lot of people in this country. So you're absolutely right in trying to get in the vegetables. And what I do in the winter, my favorite meal during the winter months when it's cold, is to saute some greens. And I'll have an egg or two depending on how hungry I am. If I have some beans available, I'll have a little bit of beans and a whole grain like quinoa. And for people who like avocados, adding a little bit of avocado is a wonderful way to get in some healthy fat. And beans, which is great for stabilizing your blood sugar, and it's also adding fiber to your diet, which keeps your cholesterol down. The egg, of course, is protein, and it contains choline, which is one of the B vitamins, and it's especially good for your brain to support your memory. The quinoa has B vitamins, E vitamins. It's also fibrous. And the greens, of course. Because we're always trying to get in 5 to 7 fruits and vegetables a day, it's really a good way to start off your day with getting at least 1 out of 7 of those fruits and vegetables. It just makes it that much easier.
Absolutely, and that's why I like to have some kind of vegetable, very often greens, with my breakfast. And then Barbara and I are really kind of on the same wavelength when it comes to our breakfast. But, other people might do the green smoothie thing with some pumpkin seeds, say, or maybe you do a tortilla with beans, cheese, and salt. And some people do, oatmeal with nuts and raisins, for instance. But the important thing is to think about those elements that Barbara's talked about and how can you get those in. And once you've got that done, that's kind of the recipe. You've got your meal idea. The next step in getting yourself organized to actually make this happen is thinking ahead and planning. Decide what morning you're going to start. Put it on your calendar if you need to. And now, which breakfast idea you're going to start with. Now, that simple step of planning ahead is going to pave the way for much greater ease in your morning, because once you know what you're going to make, then it's easy to figure out what you need to have on hand. And this is where the pantry comes in. You would be amazed at how much you can buy, stock in your pantry, and always have it on hand to make a good meal without having to make a dreaded trip to the store. So like if you take my usual breakfast, and I think this would probably work for Barbara's usual breakfast too, I always have brown rice, and for Barbara, quinoa. I'm sure she always has that in her pantry, as well as eggs. They can last a full month in the fridge. And guess what? In your freezer pantry, you can stock frozen chard, kale, and spinach. And, of course, you always have some good olive oil on hand. So I'm always prepared to make a good breakfast. But there are times we need to go to the store, and this is where list magic comes in. You don't want to go in the store. I'm always warning people, don't go to one of today's enormous supermarkets unarmed and defenseless. A shopping list is what protects you from all the awful stuff that's sold in grocery stores. And it makes sure you get the right things to make your healthy planned meals. So you probably want fresh greens, or if you want to get some avocados into your diet, or if you're a smoothie person, you want to maybe get some other vegetables to put in. So that would be on your shopping list. Now, the equipment piece of the puzzle, like I said, it isn't usually a huge problem. But it's important to make sure you have what you need and that it really works and you know how to use it. Because, for instance, I recently got a Vitamix, and it took several times to get used to how it works and what it does with food. And it's a good thing I figured that out in advance so that when I was in a hurry and really wanted to make a quick, like, pureed vegetable soup with my Vitamix, I knew just how to do it. And the final kitchen smart strategy is simply making sure your kitchen is your friend, not your enemy. If your kitchen is such a disaster that you don't want to be there, or there isn't room for you to really get in there and make a meal, or you can't find the colander to wash your greens, or the blender is stuffed in a bottom corner cupboard, then those are the kind of things that can shut down your good breakfast dreams in a heartbeat. So I hope you see what I can mean, that this isn't rocket science, getting organized to make good meals happen. We all know about time management, space organization, and list-making skills. We write to-do lists almost every day, a lot of us. We just may not know that those same skills can be used in the kitchen with equally great results. And we may not have gotten comfortable with the idea of inviting organization into our kitchens. But as we do so and put these simple practices in place, you absolutely can make stress-alleviating meals without adding to your stress. Well, Barbara, we've talked a little bit about making those good breakfasts, using organization to make sure that those meals show up on your breakfast table. And we touched a little bit on the topic of cooking. And I know that you mentioned a couple of recipes that you like, that baked lentils. But I know another thing you've talked about, that one of your favorite foods was just a mineral broth. Can you tell us about that?
Sure. Well, mineral broth is the easiest thing in the world to make, and it's so beneficial for boosting the immune system and warming the body in the winter. And it actually helps to counter the negative effects of stress, because you can boil vegetables until they look really dead. I mean, they are dead. They lose their vitamins, but they do not lose their minerals, because minerals are not destroyed by heat. So what I do is, when I'm chopping and peeling vegetables, say I'm chopping carrots, I'll chop the head off and put it in a bag. If I'm peeling them, I'll put the peel in the bag. If I'm chopping onions, I take the onion skins, throw them in the bag, and I do that with everything, including broccoli, turnip tops, parsnip tops. Any part of the vegetable that you're not going to eat can be put into a plastic bag, and when you accumulate a full bag, say, I don't know, anywhere from 4 to 6 cups, you can put that into a large soup pot and just boil the heck out of it. Turn it down to a simmer and let it cook for about 4 hours. And if you want to, you can add some herbs. You can add other vegetables like yams, sweet potatoes, cabbage, celery, parsley, dillweed, garlic, whatever you like. And then when it cools, you strain it. Put the liquid into a jar, and you can keep it in your refrigerator for about a week, or you can freeze it. And you can either use it as a soup base, or you can sip it throughout the day. And it's just so great for boosting the immune system and warming you up in the winter. It's especially good for someone who is ill and does not feel like eating. So that's one of my favorite recipes, especially for winter, but you can use it year-round. And I know bone broths are very popular today also, and it's the same idea.
Yeah, I'm a bone broth person, and for the same reason is that they are amazing. I've only really gotten into them in the last couple of years, and my process is really similar to Barbara's. I just take the bones, I throw them in a crock pot, cover them with water, and just let them cook. With the bones, I let them cook, even 2, 3, sometimes 4 days for really big bones, just giving them an opportunity to really leach out any of the good stuff that's in those bones, and that can be very supportive. I usually make it into a soup, but I would imagine it would also be just fine to sip it like you talk about, Barbara, during the day to kind of get a replenishment during the day of some of the minerals and so forth and vitamins that we use up during the day if we're caregiving and handling all these different things that go on in our life and the stressful type of things that causes over the day.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, Barbara, we're getting near the end of our time today, but I think you had a couple more tips to share with people. Is that right?
Yes. We'd like to try to use the seasons to our advantage, and they can really support the body to tune in with seasonal rhythms. For example, we're having this conversation in October in Colorado, and it just happens to be very cold, unseasonably cold right now. So we want to start eating warmer foods. And since, as I said earlier, our brain is 60% fat, we want to make sure that we get enough fat through the food we eat, like fish, walnuts, all the things I mentioned before. We also want to make sure that we stay hydrated. And I'm going to give you an example of what happened to my mother. She spent the last 2 years of her life in a wheelchair because she broke her hip. She wasn't able to stand up. She could not do anything for herself, and she was dependent on a caregiver. Well, on one occasion, she got severely dehydrated. She ended up in the hospital, and I got a phone call from a psychiatrist who said to me, "Your mother is in full-blown dementia." And I said, "No, she's not. I just talked to her a couple of days ago. She sounded fine." This doctor wanted to give her an antipsychotic drug that should never be prescribed to an older person for hallucinations. And I said, absolutely not. Well, 2 days later, I talked to my mother, and she sounded absolutely fine. And it's just an example of how important it is to stay hydrated, because our brains become dehydrated also, and it affects our memory and cognition. And during the winter months, we could drink herbal teas. The mineral broth is great. We absolutely want to stay away from soda. And you've all heard, or what's it called out here, pop. I'm from the East Coast. We call it soda. We want to drink nourishing liquids. And in my book, there's a whole section on different herbal teas and drinks that can help calm the nerves and relieve anxiety and uplift the mood.
And hydrate you at the same time, so you kind of get a lot of benefits with those teas.
Right, exactly.
Excellent. Those are great tips. And the thought I'd like to leave you with is one about hidden potential. So often, cooking in our culture is viewed as tedious and overwhelming. In other words, it's the antithesis of stress relief, and it's something that we view as something that actually causes us stress. And that's unfortunate because, in fact, cooking can be so calming, and it can really contribute to calming the waters around you when you're in the tempest of caregiving. I had experienced this, but I'd never really noticed or articulated it until I read an article. And I want to read you a few passages from this article. It's called Grounded in the Kitchen. So this article was by a woman named Hope, and she talks about the evening her father died, and she was in canning pickles, picking them out of the sweet, sticky juice and arranging them into quart jars. She goes on to say, I answered the phone, and it was my youngest sister, Ann, on the line. Sis, Daddy just died. His death didn't come as a shock, and yet it did. He'd had Alzheimer's for nearly 15 years and had recently contracted pneumonia. And the nurses and the doctors that were his caregivers had told him that he couldn't hold on much longer. Well, I went back to canning pickles after Ann called. I needed to feel and smell something tangible. My father was gone. I could no longer reach him, but I could touch the big stone crock holding my pickles. Cooking holds the key to my sanity. It grounds and comforts me and keeps me balanced emotionally and spiritually. I think cooking is a simple blend of solitude, fresh ingredients, a steel knife, a black cast iron skillet, and time. After a day's stress, I begin to regain my inner balance in the kitchen by methodically measuring, chopping, and stirring ingredients for the evening meal. Cooking delivers me from Excedrin and tranquilizers. I have stewed over relationships as I stirred a pot of soup, quarreled with my boss as I diced carrots and chopped celeries, sorted out decisions in my life as I kneaded bread, calmed myself after an argument with my husband as I layered a chicken broccoli casserole. And she goes on to talk more about her kitchen therapy. And I know that some people can't imagine the kitchen as being a place of grounding. And that's why I do what I do. We desperately need the kind of grounding, steadying, and rejuvenation the kitchen can offer us, especially if you're caring for someone else. And my hope and mission is first to make you aware that there is a way to make daily meal making something that can be done easily and simply. Such a thing really exists, and it's called the 6 steps of the Kitchen Smart Solution. And then secondly, my mission lies in helping you develop those kitchen smart skills just so you can be able to assemble and enjoy a simple, health-supporting meal in a way that isn't a big deal by harnessing the power of organization in the kitchen. And finally, my ultimate hope for you is that you'll be able to experience the kitchen as a place where your busy mind can just rest. Cooking has a magical way of taking you out of your head and focusing you on the tactile. It gives you the opportunity to create with your hands. So as you cut and cook and taste the incredible flavors of real whole foods, suddenly you're out of your head and the stresses of the day. And I promise you there's some gold hidden here, and I hope you get to experience it.
You know, I totally relate to your story, and because I always bake when I hear bad news about someone passing away, and I find it very grounding and very healing. It's always my go-to.
I loved her words on that she could no longer be with her dad and touch her dad, but she could touch the crock of pickles and
yeah, it's really beautiful.
You can touch that bread and knead it,
So I'd like to wrap up with giving some takeaways from our talk today. First of all, I think I mentioned that if you have a brain, you're at risk for having some kind of dementia in your old age. I'm going to a presentation this weekend on the latest research into Alzheimer's, so I'll be adding information on my blog, and that blog address is Barbra Cohn, all in lowercase. It's BarbraCohn.com. The blog is called the Healthy Caregiver blog, but you can access it by typing in BarbraCohn.com. And I post a couple blogs a month, and they focus on general health, ways to protect your brain, ways to cope with Alzheimer's, and overall nutrition. My book is available online at Amazon, Barnes & Noble, Walmart, Tattered Cover, Boulder Bookstore, etc. It's also available at these bookstores, and any bookstore can order it for you. It's available at many libraries throughout the U.S. So I'd like to just give you a few takeaways, and hopefully you'll remember these. It's never too late to take care of yourself. Make sure you drink water, eat a good breakfast, exercise at least 20 minutes a day, and that could just be a walk around the block. It's an instant stress reliever. Try to laugh every day. Karl Marx once said that a day without laughter is a day wasted. You can put on a funny YouTube video if you can't get a hold of your best friend who makes you laugh. And then the last thing, we didn't talk about it all, but I just want to emphasize how important good sleep is. It's important to cognitive and overall health, and if you're not getting enough sleep, please put your attention on trying to improve your sleep ritual and habits, because they're finding now that sleep deprivation can actually contribute to dementia and all kinds of health issues. including overweight. So if you'd like to find out more about sleep and other health issues, please visit my blog, and I invite you to subscribe. And Mary, you want to just give a few more takeaways about your classes?
I would like to, and let me start with a couple takeaways that I hope you got from our conversation today. The first of those is I hope you, first and foremost, leave with a sense of hope. Food has so many healing powers, and it really is possible to manageably make the kinds of foods that will help you through the stress of caregiving. Second, I hope you'll be willing to invite organization into your kitchens and start experimenting to see how it can help you make good meals without adding to your stress levels. And more specifically, the third takeaway is that you now know that putting good organization to work in the kitchen isn't rocket science. There are just 6 areas of the kitchen and cooking, and it's just a matter of applying a little common sense organization to each of these areas. And finally, as meal making becomes more and more manageable for you, I hope you'll be on the lookout and see if you can begin to taste the kind of grounding, steadying, and rejuvenation that the kitchen can offer us, especially if you're caring for someone else. And in terms of how you can stay in touch with me, as mentioned, I offer online classes around the new kitchen way of cooking, getting kitchen smart, and mind shifting to the new kitchen culture. The best way to stay in touch is by joining my email list. So you'll hear right away when I'm doing a class, and you'll also get a lot of other good food news, tips, recipes, and thought-provoking articles around food and healthy eating. I'm also happy to work with people one-on-one to make healthy meal making more manageable. But I also have 3 group programs right now that can be a big help. Cook Happy, Live Healthy is the first of these. It's an overview program that introduces you to all 6 of the Kitchen Smart strategies. It's very hands-on, so you'll not only learn about, but you'll be cooking and doing as well. It's a great way to see how all the Kitchen Smart pieces fit together. And then coming up in January, I'll be running a live class in my virtual classroom titled The Number One Most Brilliant Skill for Happier and Healthier Meal Making. And in this workshop, we'll be taking a deeper dive into the think ahead and plan habit, because that's the most powerful of all the Kitchen Smart strategies. It's a 4-week program that's also very hands-on, so you'll get a chance to actually plan healthy, stress-relieving meals. And there will be a cooking segment in each class, so you'll get some cooking fun and inspiration. And finally, if you just need a little help getting motivated around cooking, maybe you're bored and stuck in a rut, this program is perfect. It's called How to Cook Healthy Meals Without Really Cooking. It's a 5-week online series, and the classes are short, just 35 minutes. And before each class, I email you the recipe and shopping list. So then you have a plan, the recipe, and everything you need. During class, I walk you through the recipe, and at the end, voila, your meal is done. You learn how to better care for your nutritional needs, and at the same time, you make a meal that's healthful with real whole foods, something new and different. So links for all of this information can be found below this webinar recording for both my information and Barbara's. And I think I speak for Barbara that we would both love to have you in both our healthy eating communities.
Absolutely. I would love to hear from you, and if you're dealing with Alzheimer's or some other catastrophic illness, if you're caring for somebody and looking for ways to find relief, please contact me. I'm always happy to help. So I'd like to give a big thank you to Mary for inviting me to share with you my experience and my knowledge that I've learned along the way. And I thank you for caring for yourself and your families and your loved ones. My book is dedicated to all caregivers because I know what an enormous service you are doing for yourself and your loved ones. So I thank you from the bottom of my heart.
Yeah, I want to echo that. First, thank you, Barbara, for your words of wisdom. And I want to echo her thanks to all the caregivers out there. They're kind of the unsung heroes of our day. And certainly, if you have any comments or questions, feel free to email either Barbara and I, or include a comment below. If you have any kind of additions or anything that would help others listening to this webinar, put them in the comments section below. And so until next time, I wish you many happy meals and stress-free cooking. Thank you again, and goodbye.